Hi everybody. Something a little bit different today. So it's Monday, we've enjoyed the weekend, relaxing, but Monday means back to boat work and back to jobs, and there's always jobs to do on the boat. As I'd sort of reported or mentioned in a previous video, we've got some problem with some sort of vibration, some noise coming from the drivetrain system. So somewhere which I think is going to be something to do with one of the cutlass bearings. So I was talking to Christian, the engineer that installed the engine over the weekend, or messaging, and I got a little job to do this morning to check some things to see if we can kind of isolate the problem. So this is the gearbox, coupling, and then you see the prop shaft there, and then this blue thing here is called the seawater seal, and underneath that seawater seal there's a bronze tube, and inside that bronze tube is a bearing called a cutlass bearing, which is basically a vulcanized rubber bearing, which is water cooled by the flow of the water from that black tube you see on the top. What we think, or what I think may be part of the problem, is that the grub screws that hold the cutlass bearing in place may have come loose, and the bearing itself is actually slipping and rotating and causing the noise and vibration that we're finding on the boat. So task or job to do today is to carefully manoeuvre backwards the seawater seal. Obviously we can't take it all the way off, because that seawater seal does what it says. It keeps the seawater out of the boat, and if it's taken off completely then the boat will just flood with seawater. So to sort of move that blue section back up the prop shaft, hopefully to expose the grub screws, and then to check if those are tight or not. So that's the job to do first of all today. Okay, so I've been able to undo the Jubilee clips and slide partially the water seal back to expose the grub screws. I'm not sure if you can see it there, but if I get my hand under the brass stern tube inside this sleeve ends around about here, so there's about an inch just on the end, and just there you can see the grub screw, and there's one on the other side over here. So I'm going to tighten up those, see if that helps hold the cutlass bearing in place and reduce the vibration, without trying to get this to come off, because if that comes off completely then there's quite a lot of water going to start coming in the boat quite quickly. Okay, so I'm going to turn off and then catch you later. Okay, so that's that job done. Stern seal back in place, 2 U clips locked down, everything tightened down. Just for us to give it a try now, see if it makes any improvement on the noise issue. So we've done the first part of the maintenance, which was inside the boat here. So as you see, what we have is the engine feeds into the gearbox. We then have a coupling for the prop shaft, a flexible coupling, and then the prop shaft which runs all the way through to the propeller, obviously, which gives us the propulsion. So we have 2 bearing points to keep the propeller or the prop shaft in line, prevent any lateral stresses on the gearbox when it's in motion. We have the stern tube and a cutlass bearing, as I explained earlier on, in that area there, and then we have what's called a P bracket at the back of the boat, or back of the prop shaft, with a further cutlass bearing that basically keep that prop shaft in line. So again, what I'm thinking is the noise is coming because when there's lateral load, one of those 2 bearings is slipping inside its housing and causing the noise and the vibration that we've been experiencing, particularly when we're in choppy waters and a lot of side swell, which will put pressure on the prop to move side to side. So first one done, that was all done inside the boat, all successful and all cleaned up. The next one's a little bit more involved, and that means I've got to go and dive on the boat underneath, and there are 2 grub screws that hold that cutlass bearing in place, and I want to check that those are tight to ensure that that one's not rotating. So as I mentioned, the next bit's a bit more involved because it requires the use of the scuba equipment in order to get into the boat and access those grub screws. So just to basically introduce to anybody who doesn't know about scuba what the equipment, what basic equipment is, and I'm no expert. So we have, first of all, this vest device is called a BCD, or buoyancy control device. So this allows air, it has weights to control buoyancy, but also it has air intake, so it inflates, so I can find a nice neutral hovering spot whilst in the water. Obviously you've got your tank. On Quasar we have 2 tanks, which I have to obviously periodically top up because we don't have compressed air generation on board yet, but we will in the future. And then we have the regulator set. So the regulator, the mouthpiece that you breathe from, how full the tanks are. I haven't turned the tank on yet, so it's not in the red, don't worry. And then the connection from the regulator to fill the air into the BCD. Also, given that I'm a bit of a unit, I need a little bit extra more weight to get me down under the water, otherwise I just float on the top like a useless thing, and that's no good when you're doing scuba. And so, yeah, I'm not going to bother with a wetsuit today. I'm just going to basically jump in my shorts. The BCD is only going to be under there for about 5 minutes. I think that's a job done. So it wasn't the grub screws, they were tight, so that cutlass bearing at the back was absolutely fine. What I did find is we have a rope cutter around the back of the prop shaft, so if any rope gets around it gets cut rather than potentially jamming up the propeller. It was an old rope cutter that was with the boat when we got it, and there used to be a plastic spacer inside. That's gone, it's just broken, destroyed, so the whole thing was loose. And potentially touching on the propeller as well, propeller blades as well. So I've taken that off, so it's not a big deal to be able to have a rope cutter. I'll sort that out later. But yeah, I'm pretty sure, 99% sure that'll cure that problem with that noise, that vibration. So yeah, we'll give it a try. Maybe this afternoon or tomorrow. I'll go get dry and get on with the next job.